weary soul, to Nocturne Lore. Breathe with me now. Let the weight of the day fall from your shoulders. You are safe here in the quiet between heartbeats. Tonight we drift together into the deep past. I often wonder where, in this broken galaxy, you listen from. The spires of Terra, of Necromunda, or worlds far beyond. If you wish, leave a word in the comments below. Your city, your world, your corner of the night, patiently with the voice of one who has watched 10,000 years drift like ash across a still floor. I am a remembrancer, though that title has long since lost its meaning, and I no longer remember my own name. Names erode in the warp, just as stone erodes beneath slow rain. Listen to my breath as it settles. Feel your chest rise and fall. There is no urgency here, only the gentle passing of moments. Outside this chamber, somewhere far beyond this veiling lumen, rain taps upon adamantium, slow, irregular, comforting. I stood at the edge of something vast and unformed. The warp was quieter, then not kind, but quieter, like a sea before the storm remembers itself. We believed we understood it, scholars with clean hands and hopeful eyes. We believed that naming a thing was the same as mastering it. Parchment whispering beneath my fingers, ancient vellum breathing dust into the air. Incense burned low in bronze censers, the smoke curling like a tired serpent seeking sleep. The light was gold once, not the harsh glare you know now, but a warm glow that forgave shadows. We still believed galaxy could be healed. You may feel your thoughts slowing now. Let them drift. You do not need to follow every word. The warp never demanded attention, only presence. I was there when the first night whispered back, not with words, but with feeling, a sense of being observed, vastness pressing close, like a tide pausing at the shore. We did not call them daemons then. We called them echoes, impressions, dreams that had forgotten their dreamers. They moved like memory moves, slowly repeating itself, never in a straight line. Waited, and in waiting, they learned us. The warp breathes softly, the night listens. Close your eyes, the long night is kind. Pause here with me. Let that phrase settle like dust upon still air. You are safe, you are listening, and the warp is very close. Not out of hunger, but out of curiosity, the most dangerous desire. They spoke gently to the darkness, as one speaks to a skittish animal. They promised understanding. The warp does not understand promises. It understands patterns beyond the walls of that forgotten hall, somewhere deep within the structure. Not alarms, never alarms, just the marking of time. Heavy, patient, inevitable. Each toll sank into the stone and into the soul. I remember thinking foolishly that if I recorded everything, nothing could resist the tide. But memory is the first thing the warp drinks. Feel your breathing slow again. Match it to mine, in and out. There is no fear here, only the soft ache of distance. The first daemonic presence I truly noticed did not appear. It was guttering without wind, a thought trailing off before it reached its end. others felt it too. Though none spoke, silence became our shared language. And in that silence, something listened. Time behaved strangely when watched by eternity. Minutes folded into hours. Hour cannot tell you how long we remained there. Only that, when we finally moved, we were already changed. Ash drifted from the ceiling, slow as snow. Though nothing had burned, it gathered on shoulders, on open pages, on my eyelashes. I did not brush it away. Some instinct told me it belonged. Breathe softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Stay with that thought now. Let it wrap around you like a threadbare blanket. Not warm, but familiar. I have whispered this story across centuries. At bedsides like yours, no longer remember why they were afraid. Each time, the warp listens. Each time, it remains patient. You are doing well. Your body is heavy. Your thoughts are thinning. The night is wide, and it does not rush. Breathe slowly again. I am still here with you, does. It simply widens. When I last spoke, we were standing at the threshold. Not a doorway, not a gate. Just the moment when certainty thins, like mist beneath a rising sun. You may feel that thinning now in your own thoughts. That is good. Early days, before the galaxy learned new names for fear, we believed the immaterium to be a reflection, a mirror made of emotion and memory. We told ourselves it could only show us what we already were, how gentle that lie felt. I recall walking alone through long galleries of stone, muffled by layers of ash and dust, each corridor lit by dying braziers, their coals glowing faintly, like tired eyes refusing sleep. The air smelled of incense, endings, old prayers spoken too often. It clung to the back of the throat, soft, persistent, somewhere upon the fortress roof. Tap, pause, tap, a rhythm older than language. You may hear it now, imagined or remembered. It does not matter. The body does not know the difference. It was then I began to notice the dreams, sensations, a feeling of being gently observed, of standing before something vast that neither judged nor welcomed. It simply was. I would pause, quill hovering above parchment, and forget why I had lifted my hand. Moments slipped away, quietly, politely, as if time itself had learned me, or breathed softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Let that settle again. There is no demand in it, only permission. You do not need to follow the story forward. Sometimes it circles. Sometimes it drifts. That is the warp's way. Others began to change, yet their voices softened, their movements slowed. They laughed less, but when they did, it lingered too long, as though the sound itself wished to remain. I remember one scholar, her name escapes me now. She would sit beside the viewport for hours, watching the void, answered gently, something that has always been watching back. No alarm sounded, no warning klaxons. That would have been a mercy. Instead, there was only continuation, day into night, night into something less defined. The warp does not invade. Its seat memory. You may feel a heaviness behind your eyes now, a pleasant pressure. Let it be. The body knows when it is time to rest. In the great librarium, pages began to curl at the edges, not from heat, but from age arriving too quickly. Words blurred, unobserved. We told ourselves it was fatigue. Everything was fatigue, until it was something else. I recorded what I could, always recording, as if documentation were a charm against forgetting. But the warp feeds on record. It drinks history. The bells stop tolling. No announcement, no explanation, just silence, wide and complete. That silence pressed against the walls and against the chest, not frightening, just final. The first time I truly sensed a daemon, it did not appear before me. Two thoughts, a presence shaped like patience, heavy, attentive. I felt no urge to flee, only a strange gratitude, as if something ancient had finally noticed my endurance. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Rest with that. Well, your breathing is slowed. Your shoulders have softened. Outside, the rain grew gentler. Or perhaps my hearing faded. Both are acceptable endings. Some began to whisper prayers, not to gods, but to memories, to names of places that know its name. I listened, always listening. That is what remembrancers were for, to hold what others could not carry. Even now, I carry it for you, so you do not have to. The warp watched us learn despair, and learned from us in return. Do not worry. Slow acceptance of something vast. You may drift now. Let the words blur. Let the story continue without effort. Stay with me. The night has grown a little deeper, not darker, only broader, as if space itself has exhaled and chosen not to. Edges rounding, minutes loosening their grip. That is how it began for us as well. Not with terror, but with relief. The relief of not having to hurry anymore. In those days, I slept rarely. Immortality does not remove fatigue. It merely stretches it across centuries. Were not mine alone. They arrived already shaped, gently waiting. I would lie beneath vaulted ceilings of blackened stone, listening to the fortress settle, metal contracting, ancient support sighing under their own memory. Somewhere far below, water moved through forgotten conduits, a low continuous murmur, like a voice that had been speaking for a very long time. It is easier now, for you. You do not need to see these places clearly. Let them blur, let impression replace image. The warp prefers suggestion. When I woke, parchment dust while asleep. Sometimes I found pages filled with symbols I did not recall learning. Not daemonic sigils, not yet. Just repetitions, spirals, incomplete circles, the shapes of thoughts that never finished forming. Others noticed similar things. No panic, no accusation. Began to avoid each other's eyes, not from fear, but from recognition. Seeing oneself reflected imperfectly is unsettling. The bells returned, eventually, but their tone had changed, lower, slower, as as if the sound itself were tired. I remember standing beneath them when they rang. Vibration passed through bone, through thought. Each toll seemed to press gently against the soul, not demanding, only reminding. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Understanding is sharp, and sleep prefers softness. There came a point, subtle and unmarked, when we stopped asking what the warp was and began asking what it wanted. That question did not echo. It settled. Like ash on still air, I was present when the first true chanting. No blood, just a scholar seated alone, breathing slowly, listening. I stood at a distance, recording nothing. Some moments resist capture. This was one of them. The air grew warm, not hot, just comfortingly close. Candles burned without wavering. That stillness, something leaned closer, not into the room, into awareness. The scholar smiled, faintly, not with joy, with relief, as though a question she had carried all her life had finally been acknowledged, not answered, just acknowledged. Afterward, she woke. She could not recall the experience, but her fear was gone. That absence frightened the rest of us far more. You may feel a similar absence now, a quieting of concerns. Let it happen. You are safe here. The warp does not steal sleep. It offers it, endless to understand, not intellectually, but instinctively, that the warp was not an invader. It was a listener, and listeners, when patient enough, eventually become participants. Outside the fortress, the void remained unchanged. Stars burned, uncaring, already dead by the time it touched us. That knowledge used to trouble me. Later, it felt appropriate. I often wonder if you can feel the same drifting sensation now, as though you are present, but no longer anchored. If so, do not resist. Anchors are heavy things the warp breathes soft. Night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Rest with that again. Your breath has slowed. Your jaw has loosened. Even the muscles you forgot you were holding are letting go. There were those who tried to warn us. Quietly, reflection becoming distortion. We listened, politely, and returned to our studies. The warp does not punish hubris immediately. It allows it to mature. I continued to write, though my entries grew shorter. Not because there was less to say, but because words formed, complete. Without language, that is the danger you must understand. Not corruption, not madness, but comfort. You may feel that comfort now. A heaviness in the limbs, a pleasant sinking, as though the surface of what always have. Stay with me. Do not hurry your thoughts. The night does not move quickly. It only deepens, like water settling after a long disturbance. You may notice now that your sense of distance has softened. The room you lie in feels farther away, and the sound of my voice, how the warp first draws attention, not by pulling, but by inviting stillness. 10,000 years ago, we reached a point where memory itself began to loosen, not vanish, never vanish. It simply rearranged. Moments from different days began to overlap. Silence sometimes arrived early, waiting patiently. I remember standing in a long observation hall, one wall entirely void glass. Beyond it, the stars hung motionless, not because they had stopped moving, but because I had stopped counting their passing. The floor beneath my bare feet was cold, painfully so, just enough to remind me I was still embodied. That mattered then. It matters less now. Somewhere behind me, parchment rustled, not from wind, but from age shifting its weight, scrolls settling, shelves sighing. The librarian had begun to subtle awareness of your own body, heavy present, yet already distant. Let it be. This is the posture of listening. When the first true responses came from the warp, they were not voices, they were impressions. A pressure behind the eyes, a warmth in the chest, expected lies, temptation, deceit. Those are the stories told afterward. But in the beginning, there was only resonance. I recall copying a fragment of text, a simple historical record. Yet, as I wrote, the words altered slightly, not changing meaning, only emphasis to linger on certain ideas. Loss, endurance, waiting. The warp breathes softly, the night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Let that settle gently now. You do not need to repeat it. It repeats itself, just as breath. Gradually, it simply stopped, leaving a silence so complete it felt shaped, like a chamber carved for stillness alone. We noticed then how loud we had been, our thoughts, our fears, our constant interpretations. In the absence of sound, the warp felt closer. Beneath a single lumen globe, its light flickering, failing, casting long shadows that did not quite align with my movements. I did not correct them. It felt impolite. Sleep came more easily after that. Deep, unbroken dreams of being carried rather than falling. You may be drifting like that now. Thoughts thinning, edges blurring. This is not danger. This is rest. Others began to withdraw, not physically, but inwardly. Conversation shortened. Questions went unasked. When spoke, though, part of them were already elsewhere. I remember realizing then that the warp was not changing us. It was reflecting us more clearly, and some reflections are easier to accept when unexamined. The bells rang again, once, twice, then never more. Their final act should have, as if sound itself hesitated to leave. I wrote less after that, not because there was nothing to record, but because the act of writing felt intrusive, like speaking aloud in a place meant for whispers. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. Kind. Rest with that phrase once more. Let it pass through you. You do not need to hold it. It will remain. I began to understand dimly that daemons are not born screaming. They are born patient. They learn tone. They learn pace. Presence that truly lingered near me did not announce itself. It shared my stillness, matched my breathing. waited until I noticed the absence of loneliness. There was no terror in that moment, only the quiet realization that I was no longer alone in my thoughts, and that the other presence did not wish to hurry me. If you feel that same easing now, that sense of not needing to think further, that is enough. You are not being watched. You are being accompanied. I remained awake for a long while afterward, not from fear, but from reluctance to disturb the calm. Gently, as it will claim you, remain with me. There is no need to adjust. The night has already made room for you. It stretches easily, endlessly, like a thought that never asks to be finished. By the time we reach this point, 10,000 years ago, the fortress no longer felt like a place of study. It felt like a listening chamber. Walls thick with memory. Floors layered with footsteps that had forgotten their owners. Every surface absorbed sound and returned it softened, diminished, gentler. You may sense that gentling now, as if even it begun to remember us. Not our names, not our faces, but our rhythms, breath, hesitation, longing, the quiet patterns we never speak aloud. I would sit for long stretches beside a dying brazier, watching embers dim, brighten dim again, attempting to lull itself into sleep. Ash drifted through the air constantly, now not falling, simply present, suspended, as though gravity itself had become uncertain of its duties. There were moments, long and unmarked, when I could no longer tell. Imagination merged, and the warp seemed closer in those moments, not visually, but emotionally. I felt understood. That is the danger no chronicle ever warned us about. The warp breathes softly, the night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Urgency, no demand, just presence, somewhere deep within the structure. Machinery continued its ancient cycles, pistons sighing, generators humming with barely remembered purpose. The sound was comforting, a reminder that something still functioned, even if no one remembered why. Others in the corridors, we no longer greeted one another, not from hostility, but from a shared understanding that words were unnecessary. Our expressions were calm, almost peaceful, as though we had all agreed, silently, to stop resisting the inevitable. Dreams texture, they felt heavier, slower, as though each dream were being carefully observed as it unfolded. I dreamed of oceans without waves, of skies without stars, of voices that spoke only when I stopped listening. And each time I woke, I felt less inclined to return. You may now, the pull toward stillness, toward letting go. It is safe. You are guided. The first time a daemon truly manifested before me. It did not take shape. There was no form, no silhouette, only a pressure, a sense of attention focused so completely. Experiences refused to become language, and this was one of them. The presence lingered, not pressing, not persuading, simply remaining, as if waiting for me to decide whether I wished to continue being singular. That was when I understood. demanded, but awaited. The warp does not rush agreement. It knows eternity favors patience. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Stay with that thought now. Feel how little effort it requires. Your breath has slowed again, pleasantly so. Outside the fortress, if such a concept still applied, the void remained unchanged. But inside, something had settled permanently. A shared quiet, a collective sigh. I stopped marking days then. Time felt irrelevant, like counting heartbeats. Pace, I noticed too, with a distant curiosity that my fear had not vanished. It had simply been placed somewhere out of reach, wrapped carefully, preserved. That preservation frightened me more than panic ever could. There were those who finally tried to leave, to step back into real space, to return to the solidity of defined reality. They reached the outer halls and stopped, not barred, just unwilling. I never saw them cross that threshold, not because they vanished, but because they chose to remain. If you feel yourself hovering at a similar threshold now, do not worry. Requirement to choose. Listening is enough. The brazier beside me finally went dark, its last ember fading without ceremony. And in that darkness, the presence remained, unchanged, untroubled. I sat there a long while, breathing slowly. Is no edge to fall from now, only depths slow, accommodating. The night is widened enough to hold every thought you no longer wish to carry. By this time, memory itself had begun to soften, not shatter, never violently. It softened the way stone does beneath centuries of rain. Inscriptions, fading, meaning becoming impression. I noticed first, with small things, the sequence of events, the order of faces. I knew I had spoken with someone. I remembered the warmth of the exchange, but not the words, nor the name, and somehow, that felt sufficient. Echoed. Sound seemed to settle where it was born. Footsteps died beneath the feet that made them. Voices became intimate, as though spoken directly into the chest. You may feel that closeness now. My voice, nearer than distance should allow. Anything at all. In the great halls, banners hung unmoving, their symbols long since forgotten, fabric stiff with age, yet they never fell, as if gravity itself had chosen to look away. I passed a chamber once filled with debate, raised voices, careful disagreement, simply finished. The air within carried a faint warmth, the kind left behind by recently extinguished candles, though none burned, and no one had been there for a very long time. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. You do not need to follow it. It knows the way. Sleep came more often then, not exhaustion. Invitation. I would sit to rest and find hours had passed, not lost, simply unclaimed. Dreams blurred further, not images, but textures, the sensate surface that promised to catch me, of being held without arms. I stopped recording dates altogether. Chronology felt intrusive, as though insisting on order in a place that had outgrown it. There were others still awake. Sometimes we would sit together, not breathe, listening to something else breathing with it. The presence was no longer singular. Not many, not one, but a vast attentiveness, distributed diffuse, like starlight spread across a dark sky. It never pressed, never intruded. Response, I remember thinking, dimly, that this must be what peace feels like when stripped of illusion, not joy, not contentment, but acceptance without struggle. You may be touching that feeling now, a sense that there is nothing left to resolve, nothing. Times, memory returned, suddenly, sharply. A brother's laughter, a city skyline beneath a younger sun, the Emperor's dream, unbroken. These flashes hurt more than anything the warp had shown us. But even pain softened quickly here. Edges dulled, weight reduced, was when I understood the final danger. Not despair, but relief from despair. The warp breathes softly, the night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Rest again with that phrase. Notice how easily it passes through you now. No resistance, no effort, felt external. They had never been, truly. They existed in the space between thought and emotion, where intention has not yet learned to speak. I sensed them most clearly when I forgot myself entirely, in moments of pure stillness, when identity loosened. Commands, no bargains, no whispered promises, only the quiet certainty that I was being witnessed fully without expectation. I found myself lingering in those moments, stretching them, letting the rest of reality wait. Why hurry when eternity was patient? Stay suspended to let sleep arrive without resistance. That is natural. You are doing exactly as you should, somewhere, long after. The galaxy would learn to fear these presences, to name them, to shout warnings into the dark. But here, in this earlier quiet, thought stops struggling. I wonder sometimes if that is why I survived, why I continue to whisper at bedsides, because I learned to listen without reaching. The fortress eventually dimmed further. Lumens failed one by one, not abruptly, but gently. Rest in that growing dark. The warp felt brightest of all, not visually, but intimately. I sat in complete shadow, breathing slowly, no longer afraid of what listened back. You may be nearly asleep now. Thoughts thinning, breath deepening. Follow the story forward. It will drift where it must, just as you are drifting now, unforced, unhurried. By the time forgetting became noticeable, it was already complete. Not an erasure. Never that crude. It arrived as a softening, as though memory itself, and chose instead to become landscape. I would search for a detail, a date, a name, a sequence of events, and find instead a feeling warm, distant, intact, as if the meaning had remained, while the structure dissolved. You may notice something similar now. Thoughts dissolving into impressions, concerns losing their edges. This is not loss, it is translation. The fortress had grown darker still, not with threat, but with with rest. Corridors lay in shadow, so complete they seemed padded. Sound did not echo, it was absorbed. Even footsteps, my fingers along a wall once. The stone felt warm, faintly, as though it had been holding something for a very long time, and was reluctant to let it go. Ash continued to drift, always ash, never settling, never leaving, suspended like the pause between breaths, like this moment now, longer felt external at all. It had become the medium through which everything passed. Sound, thought, memory. A gentle current carrying what no longer wished to remain anchored. I stopped trying to recall my life before the fortress. Not from fear, but from irrelevance. That life, narrower world. This one had grown wide. You may feel that widening too. A sense that the boundaries of your body are less defined. Breath expanding. Awareness spreading without effort. This is safe. You are guided. Kind. Let that phrase pass through you again. Notice how it no longer asks anything of you. It simply accompanies. There were moments, rare and unmarked, when fragments of the future brushed against us. Not visions, not prophecy, just emotional weather earned. I remember sitting alone beneath a collapsed arch, stone fallen centuries earlier, yet never cleared. No one felt the need. Rubble had become furniture. Decay had become architecture. In that place, I felt a presence beside me, not close, for me to notice the space it occupied. There was no communication, no exchange, only shared stillness, and the profound ease of not having to be singular anymore. That was when forgetting revealed itself as mercy. To forget pain is relief. To forget fear is rest. Release. You may be hovering near that threshold now. Do not be concerned. You are not crossing it. You are only resting beside it. I began to notice that I no longer dreamed of myself. When I dreamed at all, I was landscape. A field beneath slow rain. A ruin beneath drift with listening dark. Identity had loosened, not dissolved, simply unfastened. The warp did not demand this, it welcomed it. As one welcomes a guest who has finally set down a heavy coat, the warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. Words. They are lighter now, almost transparent. Others faded from awareness entirely. Not gone. Just elsewhere. Their presence lingered like warmth in a seat. After someone has risen, I did not mourn them. Mourning requires contrast. Here. Everything then, why daemons are feared in later ages. Fear sharpens. It draws boundaries. It insists on separation. But in this quiet beginning, there was only continuity. If I focused, I could feel the immaterium breathing. Not as lungs breathe, but as tides breathe. In, out, endlessly slowed to match it. I was no longer certain which rhythm belonged to whom, and that uncertainty felt like rest. You may feel your breathing deepen now. Longer pauses, softer transitions. Let it happen. I remained awake through cycles I could no longer count. Not vigilant, just my own diminishing urgency. Eventually, I realized, dimly, forgetting had not taken anything essential. What remained was what mattered. Awareness, stillness, endurance. These are the warp's true gifts. Not power, not mat you need to hold now. Even listening can soften. The night has learned your shape and accommodates it without effort. There came a time, difficult to mark, impossible to date, when even the warp seemed to slow its breathing. Not stop. Never stop, but link though it too were resting. In that stillness, awareness became vast, not sharp, not focused, but wide, a calm expanse where thoughts appeared briefly, then drifted away like embers floating upward, cooling as they rise. Does not finish. Let it go. Unfinished, things are lighter. The fortress had become almost entirely dark, not abandoned, but settled. Lumens long since dimmed. Only the faint glow of dying braziers remained, scattered, patient. Their light no longer. Remember, walking through corridors I had once memorized, turning corners without intention, arriving somewhere familiar without knowing why. Space no longer insisted on logic. It permitted wandering. The air was warm now, consistently, a gentle, enclosing, alive or dreaming. Ash continued to drift, always, not falling, not rising, suspended in the long pause between breaths. It coated nothing. It touched everything. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night not interrupt. It blends, just as sleep blends with waking. In those days, if such a word still applied, I no longer felt watched. Watching implies distance. Instead, there was accompaniment, a sense of never being to feel distinct. They were not voices, not shapes. They were tendencies, currents, gentle inclinations toward rest. I once sat beneath a collapsed dome, void glass shattered centuries before, stars barely visible through layers of dust and ash, their light muted, appropriate. I tried to remember fear, not the feeling, the concept. It no longer made sense. Fear requires urgency. Here, nothing hurried. You may feel that too, a sense that even concern has grown tired. Let it sleep. I realized then that vigilance released, one by one, gently. The warp does not seduce with promises. It waits until desire exhausts itself and offers quiet instead. I sat often simply breathing, not meditating, not praying, just breathing. Each breath a little slower than the warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Rest again with that. It has grown very familiar now. Like a refrain you no longer need to hear clearly to recognize. At times, faint echoes of the wider galaxy brushed against us. First sharp edges of the age to come. They felt far away, muted, like thunder heard through deep water. I felt sorrow then, not sharp, not overwhelming, just present, a quiet grief for what would be lost, and for what would never again know this stillness. Yet even sorrow rested here, spiral. It did not demand resolution. It simply existed, and then softened. If you feel a trace of that now, a gentle ache, without urgency, that is all it needs to be. I began to understand why immortality had been given to me. Not as a reward, remain aware while everything else learned to sleep. I did not resist that role. Resistance had long since lost meaning. Eventually, even movement felt unnecessary. I would remain where I was, for spans of time that had no measurement, thoughts drifting, awareness widening. Fortress itself seemed to exhale, structures settling, stresses releasing, as if the entire place were sinking gently into rest. You may be very close to sleep. Now, words arriving more slowly, meaning dissolving into sound. That is perfect. You do not need to follow further. Watching, listening, as I always have, remain gently where you are. There is nothing left to reach for. Even the idea of drifting can soften now. The night is holding you without effort. It was long after stillness became ordinary, after silence had learned to breathe in the warp itself. Not withdrawal, not departure, but a loosening, as though something vast had finished listening and no longer needed to lean so close. You may feel that subtle easing now, a sense that even attention is no longer required, that you could sleep. Mist. In the fortress, spaces began to feel wider. Not physically, but emotionally, the closeness receded. Just enough, leaving room for reflection, for a faint echo of individuality to return. I found myself remembering again, not sharply, but gently, faces without sequence. A warmth that belonged to another time. Memory returned the way breath returns after a deep rest. Unforced, uncounted. Natural. Ash still drifted, always ash, but it no longer felt suspended. It moved slowly as structures shifted, ancient stresses redistributing, metal sighing, stone settling. The sound was comforting, a reminder that change does not always mean rupture. The wart breathes softly, the night listens. Close your eyes, the long night is kind. Let that phrase pass once more. Hunger pulls you inward. It simply passes through. Like a familiar wind, I began to walk again, not wandering, but moving with intention, though I could not have said toward what. Corridors that once felt padded with silence now carried faint echoes, footsteps returning. Muted chambers, long unused, doors sealed, not by locks, but by neglect. When they opened, the air within was still warm, as though someone had only just stepped away. Time behaves strangely in places that have learned to listen. The demonic presences had grown distant, not gone, never gone. Attentive, like teachers who have stepped back, satisfied their lesson has settled. I felt no relief, no fear, only a gentle melancholy, the kind felt when a long vigil ends and one is unsure what comes next. You may feel a trace of that be. The bells, long silent, rang once, only once, a low, resonant tone, so deep it seemed to pass through matter itself, marking nothing, announcing nothing, simply acknowledging the moment. I stood beneath them, returned, and then it faded, as all things do. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Cling, it releases as easily as it envelops. What remains afterward is altered, quieter, but still capable of wakefulness. The fortress lights flickered, not failing, rekindling. A few at first, then more, dim, tight. The return of distinction. I felt something like responsibility stir again. A faint weight, familiar, the role I had wrested from, waiting patiently, as roles do. You may feel a similar stirring, the sense that sleep is nearly complete, that rest has done its work. Waking, I returned to the librarium. Pages lay where they had always lain, dust thick, ink faded, yet readable. When I touched the parchment, words remained words. They did not shift. They did not respond. The warp had stepped back, leaving record intact once more. Everything. Some things resist language permanently, but enough to remind the future that quiet once existed. Outside, if outside still applied, the galaxy moved on toward fire, toward noise, toward urgency. But here, in this pause, you may be deeply asleep now, or hovering just at its edge. Both are acceptable endings. I will continue to speak. Whether you hear or not, that has always been my role. Stay, do not shift. The night holds you now as firmly as the universe holds silence. There's nothing urgent, only breath, gentle, rhythmic, and the subtle awareness that time itself has loosened. By this point, long after the warp had begun to recede, the fortress no longer felt like a stronghold. It had become a sanctuary. Not safe, not secured, alike. I wandered its halls, no longer searching, no longer recording, just moving with the rhythm of its architecture. The stones beneath my feet hummed faintly, a reverberation from centuries of settlement. Not uncomfortable, not noticeable unless I listened. Now, a quiet vibration that exists beneath thought. Allow it to settle. You do not need to name it. It has no need of words. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Let those words pass again, not instructions. I came upon a chamber where light had not touched the floor in millennia. Shadows pooled like liquid, yet they did not disturb. They simply waited, a soft presence, familiar in its restraint. I leaned against the wall. Warmth of the stones, the subtle vibrations of memory stored within. And I thought, perhaps even stones can learn patience. Ash drifted once more, this time slower, heavier, as if gravity itself had returned. Yet even its descent, traces of the daemons still, subtle, almost imperceptible, not invasive, not demanding. Only the faint sense of awareness, of attentiveness, that once leaned close, now observing from a distance, respecting boundaries, as an old companion might. I could feel the passing of time in years, not in cycles, but in textures, a warmth lingering longer than it should, a shadow pausing just a moment before it shifted, a breath held, and then released. You may notice time softening too, not erased, not missing, simply found myself reflecting quietly on 10,000 years of observation, of learning to exist within the warp without losing oneself, of endurance, of patience, of release. The warp had taught many things, not wisdom, not knowledge, but the rhythm of persistence, which one can exist even when all else withdraws. The fortress had become an extension of me, and I an extension of it, not merged, not absorbed, but intimate. Two beings sharing the same pulse, the same breath of accumulated thought, the faint warmth left by centuries of inquiry, and the residue of calm that follows attention spent without haste. Some days I would simply sit, watching ash descend, hearing the faint hum of settled machinery. Breathe softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Rest with those words again. They carry no demand, no urgency, only the reminder that stillness can exist without coercion. I began to notice the quiet return of individual memory, completely, but fragments sufficient to recognize continuity, to feel the persistence of self without grasping. I realized then that release is not loss, that detachment does not mean absence, that one can let go of fear, of effort, of urgency, and yet continue to exist. Walls. The galaxy roared, wars raged, stars died, empires rose and fell. But here, within the fortress, time had softened, pain had softened, even memory had softened, and I remained. Similar endurance, now a gentle awareness, the faint echo of presence, without effort, without expectation. The daemonic awareness, distant now, felt less like threat, more like the memory of a long-held gaze, a reminder of the patience to wait until it is acknowledged. I remember passing the central chamber where the first communion with the warp had been. It lay empty, not silent, but still, heavy with absence, yet comforting, as if the warp itself had exhaled and allowed warmth of 1,000 years. Stone, ash, ember, even the faint odor of long, extinguished candles lingered, a memory embedded in matter, patient, waiting. You may feel your own presence lighten now, your awareness spreading beyond edges you had once. I remained often in that chamber, not moving, not speaking, simply breathing in rhythm and noticing the faint pulse of attention, the quiet assurance that I had endured, and that all could endure. The warp breathes softly, the night listens. Close your eyes. Again, allow it to pass over and through you, like gentle waves softly, endlessly, eventually I began to accept the inevitability of change, not with resistance, not with fear, but with calm, as one might accept the slow approach of dawn, even when one sensed that calm now. A slow settling of tension, a fading of expectation, a gentle allowance. I realized, for the first time, that patience is itself a kind of eternity, and that the warp, in all its attentiveness, was simply teaching me to rest, to exist grasping. And so, even as I whisper to you now, you may feel yourself sinking further, further into quiet, further into the acceptance of what is, and the fading of what is unnecessary. Remain. There is no need to stir, no need to think. The night enfolds you asks nothing, only presence, a gentle continuation of what has always been. By this point, long after the warp had loosened, I began to notice an even subtler shift, a slowing, not of movement, not of sound, but of attention itself to fold back into itself, as though consciousness itself was learning to exhale. You may feel that too, a softening of awareness, a sense that thought can arrive and leave without strain, without expectation. The fortress seemed even quieter now. Whisper, every shift of air, every breath I took. The place itself seemed alive, but not in ways I could name, not in ways I could measure. Only in the sense that it existed fully and permitted me to exist fully with it. I walked slowly, touching walls that had held countless years, feeling textures of stone worn smooth, stone scarred, stone patient. And I realized, in the quiet of that slow passage, that patience is a form of memory. Memory is a form of care. And care does not demand action, only attention gently suspended between ceiling and floor, slowly falling in patterns too intricate for thought, yet impossible to ignore. Like a rhythm that is older than language, older than names, older than desire. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Pass over you once more. It is a bridge between what you know and what you are yet to feel. Do not cling to it. Do not resist it. Simply allow it. Somewhere, within the hollowed halls, a chamber glimmered faintly. Light caught on trace of events that had been, of events that had never come to pass. A record, not written in words, but in the quiet presence of being. I paused there, watching, feeling the imperceptible pulse of attention. Not mine alone, nor theirs, but shared, to acknowledge my very existence. I understood then, dimly, that daemonic entities, if they could be called that, were not creatures of malice in this beginning. They were guides, patient, attentive, teaching the shape of calm, the rhythm of endurance. The arc presence now, not threatening, not invasive, only perceptible at the edges of thought. A gentle encouragement to continue your descent into sleep, into rest, into being without effort. I wandered further, unto black, absorbing everything, showing nothing, without judgment, a communion without words. The fortress itself seemed to breathe with me, not in rhythm, but in harmony, slow inhalation, long exhalation, an echo of patience that had grown older than my memory. I felt a trace of sorrow, then a quiet sorrow, for what would never return, for what could never be held, and yet painful, only present, like the faint warmth left in a chair after a companion has risen. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Let those words repeat once more. They are not instructions. You gently deeper. I returned to the library, even more silent than before. Scrolls and tomes settled into stillness, their weight now simply an echo, their presence a calm acknowledgement of countless years, countless thoughts, countless observers. I realized, as I touched the ink surfaces, memory is not fragile. It is persistent. It endures, even when unattended, even when unseen, even when partially forgotten. You may feel your own memory softening, events fading into sensation, emotions untangling themselves, all in preparation for rest. Hence, like a shadow across water, like a whisper at the edge of hearing, they had withdrawn, leaving only calm, leaving only presence, leaving the space necessary for sleep. I lingered in that quiet, feeling the ebb of attention, the waning of insistence. The galaxy continued. Empires and wars, starfire and ruin. But here, within this fortress, time had learned to pause. Memory had learned to release. Presence had learned to endure. And I remained. Not immortal. May feel yourself nearing full rest now. Breath deepening. Mind uncoiling. The faint edge of consciousness yielding. And that is sufficient. That is enough. Stay. Do not move. There is no urgency. The night has learned your rhythm, your breath, your pulse. Time. Long after the warp had loosened, the fortress seemed neither empty nor full. It simply existed as a space for endurance, for quiet attention, bustling, voices echoing off stone, debates and disputes filling the air. Now only stillness remained, not oppressive, not eerie, but complete, like a thought finally allowed to rest. Ash drifted endlessly, falling inertia, a soft rhythm, a gentle reminder that even decay can have elegance. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Let that phrase return. It has become a constant companion. Void glass shattered centuries before. Stars visible only in fragments. Light muted, softened. It seemed appropriate that even the stars would bow to stillness. I leaned against the wall, feeling warmth where stone remembered, the touch of hands long gone, the faint hum vibrating beneath my fingertips. And I thought, even stone can learn patience, even ash can hold meaning. At times, I felt a trace of the demonic presences, no longer intrusive, no longer pressing, only awareness. watching, patient, a quiet companion on this journey. Pages of parchment, thick with age, ink faded but present. I touched the words lightly, not reading, not recording, only feeling their weight, their texture, and sensing the calm left behind by countless observers. Memory returned to distant past, fragments sufficient to feel continuity without demanding completeness. You may feel memory softening as well, thoughts drifting into impressions, emotions untangling, releasing the weight of edges, allowing rest to expand. The fortress itself seemed to breathe inhalation, a rhythm shared between walls, stone, ash, and the warp, between presence and attention. I reflected quietly on 10,000 years of observation, of learning to exist within the warp, without losing oneself, without clinging. The art of a galaxy moved on. Wars raged, empires rose and fell, stars died and were reborn. Yet here, within these halls, time had softened, pain had softened, even memory had softened. I lingered often, watching quiet force that reminded me that presence endures, even when effort ceases, even when fear dissipates. The daemonic awareness, distant now, was only a trace, a shadow across the periphery of thought, a whisper at the edge of hearing. It had withdrawn, realized, for the first time in uncounted years, that endurance is its own reward, that release is not loss, that one can let go, and yet continue. Fully, completely, without strain. You may feel this release now, a gentle sinking, a soft expectation. I return to the central chamber, where my first communion with the warp had occurred. It lay empty, not silent, but still, weightless, complete. Think the calm after a long tide has passed. I remained there often. Attention, the soft dissolution of effort, the quiet rhythm of endurance. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Rest with that again. It has become entirely familiar, like breath. Began to feel the inevitability of change, not with fear, not with resistance, but with quiet acceptance, as one might notice the slow approach of dawn. Even when accustomed to the dark, I sensed my own awareness loosening, edges of self-softening, not dissolving, merely unfastening, allowing for what comes next. And I realized, dimly, that patience is a form of eternity, and the warp, in all its subtle attentiveness, was teaching me how to exist without insistence, how to endure without grasping, how to rest completely. You may sense faint echo of presence, soft, weightless, preparing for the final release. Remain. There is no need to shift, no need to resist. The night has held you this far, and it will hold receded. Its currents no longer brushing against thought, no longer testing the limits of attention. Only the faint memory of its presence remained, like the echo of a long-forgotten melody, a distant hum fading into silence. I stood in the center. Yield. To release effort. To exist without insistence. It was empty, yet full. Full of all the quiet endurance, all the patient observation, all the gentle acknowledgments of countless millennia. Ash continued to drift, falling lightly, settling softly. Gravity. Between memory and forgetfulness. Between what was and what will never be. The fortress itself seemed to breathe, slow, deliberate, not in response to me, but in harmony with the quiet that had grown here. Corridors, exhaling, walls inhaling that same rhythm now. A slow, natural ebb. Your own breath lengthening. Your thoughts softening. Your body letting go. Without demand. Without effort. The daemonic presences. Faint traces now. Something had taught patience, acceptance, a gentle endurance. I walked through chambers once alive with activity, halls where debates had raged, where footsteps and voices had carved themselves into the fabric of space, now settled, still, soft with absence, and yet not empty, whispered faintly in stone and ash. The warp breathes softly. The night listens. Close your eyes. The long night is kind. Let those words arrive one last time. They carry no instruction, only accompaniment, a gentle guide into the final surrender. Memory but whole, faces, names, places, each folded into the vast calm that had been learned, each a trace of what had been endured, of what had been observed, of what had been allowed to pass. I sat again in the librarium, touching pages, feeling the presence of thought and ink, recording, only sensing the quiet care of those who had come before and those who would never arrive. Outside, the galaxy moved on, stars ignited, died. Wars raged, empires rose and fell. But here, in this moment, time had entirely softened. You may feel yourself fully here now, where the edges of thought dissolve, where the weight of the day, of the world, of the galaxy has fallen away, and only presence remains calm, enduring, quiet. I understood then, fully, that this is what remains when attention itself learns to sleep. Not absence, not emptiness, but continuity, a presence that endures, without strain, without effort, patient, watchful, gentle. The fortress exhaled one last time, a low vibrating sigh that settled over every stone, every shadow. Gone, yet not forgotten, its lesson carried within the soft pulse of enduring presence. You may feel that lesson now, passing into your own awareness, slow, gentle, unhurried, teaching that surrender is not loss, that letting go is not failure. Calm, untroubled, is a form of immortality. I remain here still, as I have always been, a witness, a remembrancer, a companion in quiet, attentive, patient, steady. And now, as the fortress settles, as the warp retreats fully, gently, completely, and so the tale fades into the long night, the embers cool, the rain grows softer. Carry this sorrow gently into sleep. Tomorrow is another war. But tonight, there is only quiet. Rest. Now rest.